I was going to say, isn't that how it normally is? But maybe not. Hey, status report. What's going on in there? Still a no-go. She's being even more stubborn than usual. Her actions completely scrambled the timeline, and you've seen her poll numbers. Can she still get the job done? Yes, of course she can. Just don't forget what we've put on the line. Never will. Just be careful, okay? You too. And eat something healthy. Stress burns calories. I'm hanging up now. Baby carrots. Stress burns calories. Then the goal is to be as stressful as possible so that you lose weight. Time to get stressed. Mom, hey, how you doing? I'm fine, just fine. Really? Of course not. We've been here for hours. We've knocked down philosopher after philosopher, but the gate still hasn't accepted the validity of my position. Not only the gate that's being stubborn here. Stepping back as a strategy isn't panning out. It's making us seem weak. The last few hours, you've coddled Machiavelli, critiqued democracy, and given leeway to communism. How do you think that'll play with voters? Tendency to double down rather than reassess, rooted in childhood experience. I need to go on the offensive. I need a game changer. Whoever's next, I'm really going to let them have it. Aggressive tendencies could habitualize if not handled effectively. Compounding environmental stress factors should not be ignored. Hey, hold on. Who are you and what are you doing? Apologies, just making some initial observations to prepare for our upcoming session. I was going to let that scene play out, but I guess we'll get started. Allow me to introduce our resident psychiatrist, France Bannon. Born in the French colony of Martinique in 1925, his insight has proven invaluable for many of us here. I don't need therapy. Everyone needs therapy. Being human is hard. It does no good to pretend otherwise. But I'm not here to treat you, Senator. I'm here to debate. You claim your American system is perfect. Well, I have thoughts about that. In addition to his psychiatric work, Fanon wrote extensively about the effects of colonial attitudes on societies and the global struggle of decolonization. He personally participated in the struggle to liberate the Arab population of colonial Algeria from French control. My work was focused on a time and place. I said as much from the start of my first book. The struggles of the colonized in Algiers were not the same as the colonized in South Africa, the native in South America, or the black community in America. But there is a kinship between all the oppressed, which I suppose is why I stand here today, my writings deemed immortal by history. The specter of my old reflections hangs over your ideals, whether you acknowledge it or not. Probably better we acknowledge it. Fine, acknowledge. Let's get started. Alrighty. Fanon. Every institution in colonial societies, no matter how innocent seeming, serves to extend and enforce the culture of the colonizer as the true culture. A multitude of moral teachers, counselors, and bewilderers separate the exploited from those with power. In such a situation, the colonized have no choice but to conform to succeed, adopting the manner of their oppressors. But true assimilation is impossible. The colonized will always be reminded of their otherness by the colonizer. No perfect society would allow these inhumane conditions, so we must dismantle them by any means necessary. And so we are faced with an unwinnable dilemma. Governments demand we assimilate, but also demand we remember our place. We are forever caught between these two incompatible imperatives. This is the lived reality for the black, for the indigenous, for any a nation actively oppresses. Now then, Senator, I believe you plan to let me have it. Yeah, I'm not doing that. Adney, you can keep the lead. What? I'm an old white woman. The optics of my debating race are terrible. Last thing I need during election season is to get canceled. Oh my god. Look, it's like you said at the start. You don't have to prove he's wrong. Just see if we can learn something. Nice to know you are actually listening, but why can't you do that? Because I'm bad at it, Pumpkin. I'm bad at not arguing. This self-reflection may represent progress for the senator. I guess. That or she's just doubling down on political cowardice. Well, okay then. Fannin, let's see how this goes. Thanks for stopping by, Ken. Appreciate it. Enjoy getting bullied by the therapist. I'm not gonna get bullied. I have faith in myself. Yes, I'm sure the process will be informative. Alrighty. Every institution in colonial societies, no matter how innocent seeming, serves to extend and enforce the culture of the colonizer as the true culture. Clarify. Societies are constructed around the values of the ruling population. The laws and norms of society naturally extend those values, cementing them into place. Back it up. Consider the matter of language. To speak a language is to take on a world, a culture. When a colonial power first takes over, they mandate all speak the language of the mother country. And in Martinique, it was not enough to speak French. Society demanded you speak a certain type of French. My own mother drilled this into me at a young age. We don't want any of that Creole nonsense around here. Dignified, proper, white French only. This is just one example. What you eat with, how you greet each other, which drugs are permissible and which are not, all are defined by the colonist culture. Connect. This establishes why we have an issue in the first place. Without critical examination, society naturally falls into these patterns. A multitude of moral teachers, counselors, and bewilderers separate the exploited from those with power. Verify? There's no shortage of individuals, even among the oppressed, who claim the downtrodden are where they deserve to be. Either because the oppressed are inherently inferior, or they simply have not tried hard enough. Back it up. The colonists reserve the nicest homes, the finest schools, and the most respected jobs for themselves. The colonized are denied access to the necessary tools for success. As a result of this denial, and only this denial, many in the native population become exactly what they're believed to be: poor, destitute, and uneducated. Through extraordinary fortune, some may still break through, climb the ranks of civilized society. But such individuals are then held up as proof that there is no real problem. If you'd only work as hard as she had, you too could have the deluxe model shack. It all makes it easier to believe the native is wholly responsible for their position, which in turn justifies keeping them there. Connect. It establishes there are forces actively keeping these hierarchies in place, which helps us picture the lengths required to undo them. In such a situation, the colonized have no choice but to conform to succeed, adopting the manners of their oppressors. What do you mean by this? To succeed in a colonized society, you must act like the colonizer. I've heard it said that America should be a melting pot, people from all over merging into one culture. Well, the pot is definitely hot. It scalds so many who try to jump in. I always prefer the salad bowl ideal. Everyone maintains their own culture while contributing to the greater whole. That is a preferable mental model, but so many still desire to boil that salad into bland cultural sludge. I'm afraid I'm lost. Why does it matter how America cooks its citizens? I agree, Arbiter. These food metaphors are getting hard to swallow. Boo. Back it up. Why do we demand a black man from Upper Niger wear shoes? Why do we act as if that is necessary to become the next Mozart? That is no less ridiculous than demanding a white man study Hindu lyricism, or else he will never become an Einstein. And yet, if I show up to a job interview in something outside the cultural norm, be it a sari, a shuka, or a kilt, my prospects will be diminished. Accents that are strange or unintelligible will only cause further damage. But if I show up dressed in a suit, if I walk the walk and talk the talk, well, my odds are a little better. A little better? A little better. Or even if I do all those things, I am still a black man. Side note, I was introduced to this band from India called Bloodywood, and they do metal folk music, and it's amazing. That actually reminds me, I still need to go buy their album. We're gonna take a brief tangent here. I need to remind myself to go buy that album. Buy the Bloodywood album. Thank you, current me. Future me will appreciate it. Connect. The culture of the colonizer is not just a surface detail, it is embedded in the social contract. Social contracts, like we discussed with Locke. Didn't realize you were a fan. I have a feeling I know where this is going to go. John Locke, acute egomania, situation worsens daily. Without intervention, it may become insufferable. When did you write that? Let's see, 50 years ago? He stopped coming to his appointments. Yeah, that checks out. I'm a fan of some Lockean ideals, life and liberty, but too often they exist only for a few. Alright, I thought he was, like, gonna wait for the other shoe to drop, because, you know, first three letters of his last name is Van. But true assimilation is impossible. The colonized will always be reminded of their otherness by the colonizer. Clarify. No matter how hard you try, you'll never truly be a member of the colonizing group. Whether they seize upon your mannerisms, your language, or your skin, you will be singled out as different. They won't let you forget. Back it up. They're really impossible though. I mean, sure, there are racists out there, but I will speak to my own experience. To be black is to always be aware of your body and the way others see your body. For a time, among trusted friends, you can perhaps relax, but that only makes the sting worse when the illusion is shattered. I will never forget the child who stopped in the street to tell his mother he was frightened by my mere presence. All I could do was laugh, but it wasn't funny. Even in the intelligible realm, I never know when I'll run into another Immanuel Kant situation. Kant came to agree with you. Yes, it only took 30 years to convince him I wasn't some genetic outlier. Might have gone more quickly if he didn't insist on constantly taking walks. That man's neuroses are overwhelming. If I had known my reward for philosophical clout was an eternity without, or with history's neediest shut-ins. And Ariadne is gone. Connected. This establishes that the demand placed on the oppressed is not one that can be met. It is a fundamentally untenable situation. No perfect society would allow these inhumane conditions, so we must dismantle them by any means necessary. Clarify. The colonial system is dehumanizing and fundamentally immoral. It must come to an end, whatever it takes, in order for mankind to move forward. And by whatever it takes, you mean whatever it takes. There could be no limitations on the fight for freedom. It's nice to dream of reform through speeches and negotiations, and certainly those should be attempted. But when those fail, we cannot stop there. The people will have to take up arms.
Nonsense!
Wait, hold on. I know I said I wasn't taking the lead, but this just took a hard left turn. Oh? I agree these issues need to be addressed. During my time in office, I've tried my best to help do so. But to advocate violence, it can't come to that. Too many empty chairs at empty tables. We have to be better.
Nonsense!
It does not surprise me that this is where we break, Senator. After all, you've staked your life on believing in the system. To consider a reality that conflicts with that, well, I'm sure it provokes dismay. But I am not advocating violence. I am advocating the end of violence. But you just said, I stand by what I said. Force cannot be eliminated as a tool in resisting oppression. But that is not because violence is desired. It is because society makes it necessary. Allow me to elaborate. Though the colonized intellectual often seeks reform through political action, such compromises inevitably fall short. Colonization is inherently violent. It relies on enforcing the idea that the native is weak or inferior. When the oppressed rise up in arms, the very notion upon which the colony is built are challenged. The system cannot survive the shock. Thus, revolutionary violence breaks the cycle of violence, rather than escalating it. You see, Senator? Violence is part of the remedy because violence is already in the system. And when we revolt, it's not in favor of a particular culture. We revolt for many reasons. We can no longer breathe. Oh, because for many reasons we can no longer breathe. I skipped over that word. Do we really have no good examples of non-violent reform? The Emancipation Proclamation, the Civil Rights Movement. Oh yes, I forgot America solved racial injustice twice. I very much look forward to you solving it a third time. That was a sick burn. Oh my gosh, get absolutely destroyed. Each helped at least, but pumpkin, neither of those were really peaceful. The Emancipation Proclamation came only in the third year of a war, and the Civil Rights Movement involved countless clashes between protesters and police. I see, very interesting. Tell me, Senator, how do you reconcile this observation with your current ideals? Oh, well, I mean, there is enough power in the Senate to correct these injustices. Of course there is. But maybe it wasn't used well, historically. Historically, of course. Indeed, many successful nonviolent movements worked because their leaders were presented as an alternative to the threat of violence. Violence was, therefore, still a key part of the solution. Okay, well then, guess it's time for me to ask questions, huh? Alright, though the colonized intellectual often seeks reform through political action, such compromises inevitably fall short. Clarify, hold on. What exactly is a colonized intellectual? A native who has obtained status in colonial society, often by translating the native experience for the colonizer. Their success is deeply rooted in the colonial system, so they have a vested interest in the system continuing. Now, these individuals are not uncaring to their fellow natives. They often attempt to use their status to appeal to those in power. But they limit these efforts to acceptable, polite channels, meeting the oppressors on their own turf. This approach gives them very little leverage, and without leverage, the results will be wholly inadequate. Back it up. Politics involve negotiation, and negotiation involves compromise, correct? Yes, that's the ideal anyway. Well then, what is the compromise between continue the oppression and stop the oppression? Good news, everyone. We're doing a little less oppression. Confetti and drinks for all. Nice burst of serotonin. These little victories. They may even ease the tension for a while. But in the end, the system continues mostly as before. The native will still be held down. Connect. This is essential setup from my overall point. If political action alone was an effective remedy, the rest would become unnecessary. But because such efforts often fall short, the people are forced to mobilize. Colonization is inherently violent. It relies on enforcing the idea that the native is weak or inferior. Clarify. As long as the colonial system is in place, violence against the colonized is part of daily life. Native communities are underfunded and over-policed. Natives are viewed always as criminals and never as victims. Whether the force deployed is psychological or physical, it all works to keep the native in their place. Back it up. Through organizations like the military and police, governments claim the only legitimate license for violence. And in colonial societies, the arm of the law actively seeks out the native, presuming they are guilty. I cannot count the number of times I was stopped by Algerian police solely because they mistook me for an Arab. When they discovered I was from Martinique, they apologized profusely. Of course we know a Martinican is quite different from an Arab. When I protested, saying we are all the same, they'd laugh and reply, you don't know them. There was always a target on someone, on whom varies from community to community, but the results are the same. And the violence is not always physical. War is waged on both the body and soul of the native. Depictions of the colonized as stupid, as pitiable, do real psychological harm to native and settler alike. All are key in colonialism, and all will persist as long as colonial thought does. Connect. This establishes it is the colonial government, not the native, who introduces violence into the system. It is only because force is used to maintain the hierarchy that force is needed to resist it. When the oppressed rise up in arms, the very notion upon which the colony is built are challenged. Clarifier. In rising up, the native asserts their humanity. They proclaim loudly that their pain cannot be ignored. They will remain neatly packed away, out of sight and mind. Back it up. This is a logical extension of the previous statement, as the colony relies on the native being weak to justify their subjugation. The native fighting back challenges this core principle. If society depends on the sky being red, and you pull back the curtain to reveal that it is blue, there cannot help but be some shock. That, or people will explain it away with some bonkers reasoning. How can the sky be real if our eyes aren't real? Ah, yes, confirmation bias is sinister, especially when combined with questionable logic. For a man whose only weapon is reason, there is nothing more necrotic than contact with unreason. Still, while some will bunker themselves in denial, Society as a whole will be unable to avoid the tremors caused by natives asserting their humanity. Connect. This establishes why violence is such an effective lever. Resistance from the native is directly contrary to the idea that they are weak and content. It says loudly and clearly that they will not be subjugated. And the system cannot survive the shock, thus revolutionary violence breaks the cycle of violence rather than escalating it. Clarify? The outbreak of violence challenges every element of the colonial system. Inevitably, under that strain, something gives way. Back it up. Hold on, colonial powers established their foothold with military force, right? I don't understand why that same military force wouldn't steamroll any resistance. Interesting. An understandable assumption, but for several reasons, it is not that simple. In most colonial situations, the natives far outnumber the colonists, with the foreign military's resources split across multiple fronts. The simple truth is, the force required to suppress the combined will of the people is beyond even the most well-equipped superpower. Secondly, the conflict changes the economic calculus for the colonizers. Even if they could win, the war effort would destroy the resources that made the colony desirable in the first place. Finally, many colonists are not true believers in the system. Faced with open conflict, they will sympathize with the oppressed. The longer the conflict rages, the more the sympathy grows. So colonial leaders quickly learn the power of violence and find the answer is not to respond with greater violence, but to relax the tension. Okay, can we hold on to these points? They seem essential to me. I agree. Fannin, would you add them to your argument? Of course. The oppressed, when united as a whole, will form a force that no colonial power can hope to match. Clarify. The people, united, will never be defeated. As the struggle for independence spreads to the whole of the native population, colonial forces will inevitably be overwhelmed. Back it up. Okay, I'm going to need more backing on this. Weaponry can get pretty insane. Does it matter if you have more people when the other side has a tank? If the people charge the tank head-on, then yes, the tank will win. But people are resourceful and will favor guerrilla tactics over head-on conflict. Furthermore, remember we are dealing primarily with situations where an outside country is exerting its influence on a local population. It takes far more effort to ship in a tank than it does for the native to recruit more numbers. The more brutal the tactics of the colonizer, the easier local recruitment becomes. The native's forces will swell in proportion. So basically, as long as all the people stand together, they are destined to win. Indeed, the force needed to counter a united front is unsustainable, even for the greatest colonial power. Interesting. Connect. This establishes why the revolution cannot simply be crushed, as you worried. The uprising is a force that will have to be reckoned with. Economically, it becomes more profitable for the occupier to withdraw in the hopes of preserving some form of relationship with the occupied. Clarify. An all-out struggle to maintain control of the colonies quickly becomes an exercise in self-harm for the colonizer. Continued occupation drains resources on all fronts. It spends riches already obtained and damages those they still wish to extract. Back it up. Here, the forces of capitalism actually work in the natives' favor. The economies of the colonies and their motherland are closely linked. War damages the whole situation. So, when faced with escalating conflict, the business owners and trade officers at home ask, why bother? Profit is their primary interest. and a potential trade deal with an independent country is far more advantageous than a futile fight to maintain control. Getting something is better than destroying everything. Connect. This establishes how even the machinations of capitalism favor the colonized in this conflict. Whatever the cover story, the primary purpose of colonies is to extract wealth from the colonized region. But conflict makes this impossible. Even from a self-interested perspective, it makes sense for the colonists to withdraw. And when confronted with the reality of the natives' humanity, many in the colonizing country will find their hearts aligned with the native. Clarify. The colonists are not a monolith. Not all embrace the actions of their governments. Some will even fight against them. A few will even reveal themselves to be nearer to the national struggle than certain native sons. In the end, barriers of blood and race prejudice break down on all sides. Back it up. Every civil struggle in history reflects this. The oppressed have always found allies among those who could have been or previously were oppressors. These individuals will never be the core of the struggle, but they can still help. And as a colonial power is inherently more willing to listen to its own citizens, we should not underestimate pressure from within. Connect. If all colonists wish to continue oppression, the struggle would inevitably be long and bloody. The fact that many settlers will question their own involvement is an important factor in bringing the conflict to an end in the natives' favor. Okay. Okay, what Fannin is saying here is easy to straw man. I can hear the talk show host now. Fannin wants to murder all the settlers. But that's fundamentally not what he's saying. Nice to be in a space where the straw man is not the only man that matters. His pitch is about leverage, and how, if you lack it, you need to create it. The question is, will this method of creating it actually work? Well, there's only one way to find out. So these are our options. Many oppressed individuals will go to great lengths to prove that they can be part of the oppressor's culture. The native will never be allowed to fit in with those who lord over them. They will always be reminded of their lesser origins. Natives who have gained enough status in colonial society develop a vested interest in perpetuating that society. This one's titled The Role of Violence. I feel like this is the one that I want to address the most. Point 5. Leverage. Will this method of creating leverage actually work? So this one, if I were to go against this point specifically, I would go with assimilation. Because you'd have to be united. He's saying united as a whole. I'll rock with that, see what happens.
Nonsense!
Okay, Fannin. This is a difficult topic, one I'm kind of unqualified to speak about. Just want to acknowledge no more hand-wringing, Ariadne Jones. Do not treat me like I am delicate. In return, I promise to do the same for you when you inevitably say something terrible. Right. Okay, here goes. You've talked at length about how far the colonized will go to be accepted by the colonists. Walking, talking, and dressing like settlers, all in hopes of improving their status in society. Correct. They have no other choice. You've also said, despite all obstacles in their way, some do integrate, right? On some level, yes. Full acceptance is impossible, but they can obtain some degree of comfort. Well then, we have a problem, because resistance to colonial oppression, this cause that should unite the whole of the people, seems unlikely to unite the people at all. Oh? You've observed colonists are not a monolith. Not all will join their side in the struggle. But isn't that also true of the colonized? Many natives won't care about or will outright object to attempts to disrupt society. But the pitch is clearly a good one, no? An end to long-lasting inequalities. Sure, in the long term. But in the short term, the conflict only represents more instability and hardship, a bitter pill for anyone to swallow. We discussed this with Locke. People will often ignore long-term benefits if the short term is painful. Yes, that is a good point. Central to your argument of violence working is that the will of the people is enough to threaten the colonial power. After all, it's only because their power is threatened that they will make concessions. But if too many choose to sit out the struggle, the calculus changes fundamentally. It becomes much more plausible for the colonial power to nip the resistance in the bud. And in that case, violence won't accomplish anything at all. Laughter. Very, very good, Ariadne. Tragically, all of these observations are valid. It even goes beyond sitting out. In Algeria, we had the Harkis, Muslims who joined the French to fight against their own people. Every social group contains multitudes. A cause will never win 100% support. This is the reality all dreams of change must face. Great. So now not even the most drastic measures can solve these problems. Such an optimistic portrait you two have painted. An interesting assertion, Senator, especially as we have not finished painting. Your daughter has correctly diagnosed these problems, but has taken their consequences too far. I have. You have. The complacency of many natives will not stop the resistance. It will merely change how it starts. Marx dreamed of a workers' revolt to end injustice. However, the life of the native worker is too dependent on the colonial system. Would-be revolutionaries will be expelled from the unions and cities for challenging the structure on which others rely. There, among the destitute of the back country, the uneducated people whom the party ignores, the spark will actually light. Only then can revolution spread to the cities and to all people as the safety net crumbles. Facing multiple conflicts on multiple fronts, the colonial power will be forced to yield to the revolutionary leaders. With fighting at an end, the nation will finally be freed from all the conflicts of the past. Simply put, the promise of a glorious proletariat uprising is not enough for most workers to seek real change. Only among the neglected and the destitute can revolution actually spark. Ben Marx hates this argument, kinda throws him and the working class under the bus. He spent quite a few of his sessions sprawled on my couch, moping about it. You have a therapy couch here. I have a whole office. I need one. Philosophers have no shortage of baggage. You should hear Thomas Aquinas go on about his mother. Regardless, once the impoverished masses ignite into action, the security of the colonial system is proven to be an illusion. Suddenly, there's no reason for the rest of the nation to not join in. The whole of the people are united by the struggle. Impressively constructed, Fannin. Ariadne Jones, are you ready to continue your questioning? As I'll ever be. Real quick. Interesting. I don't know where to use that one, but I have a feeling I will want to use that one. Alright, Marx dreamed of a workers' revolt to end injustice. However, the life of the native worker is too dependent on the colonial system. Clarifying. There's little doubt in my mind, many of the injustices Marx observed are real. There is significant overlap between the terror of capitalism and the terror of colonialism, after all. But his dream of a glorious worker uprising is unlikely to occur in colonial countries. Back it up. Simple observation. The strings between the native worker and the colonial system are hardly hidden. They work in the settlers' factories, use the settlers' tools, and earn the settlers' currency to feed their families and build new homes. Their whole livelihood is rooted in the occupation. A revolution would risk everything. Connected. This builds off your earlier point, that many are too ingrained in the system to rise up. It explores how this failure is tied to their sense of security, so we can begin to see the way around it. Would-be revolutionaries will be expelled from the unions and cities for challenging the structure on which others rely. Clarify. Those workers who do speak up, who highlight the clear injustice all around them, will be disowned by those who ostensibly protect them. For unions and local advocacy groups, such agitators simply cause too much trouble. So they will be forced to leave before the occupying force catches wind and holds the union responsible. Yes, they never get past the complaining on social media phase. Back it up. This is a logical extension of the point you raised, Ariadne. Those invested in colonial society will want to remove revolutionaries before they become a problem. Revolutionaries will protest on their way out, of course, and try to convince the others to fight. The revolution's imminent. What do you stall for? If you stand for nothing, what'll you fall for? Come again? That was Hamilton. I quoted Hamilton just now. Seemed relevant. The hip-hop music about your colonial founding fathers. I have thoughts about that too. But even if revolutionaries did make arguments in verse, it would not be enough to convince their fellows to act. Hamilton. Hip-hop music. talk to me about some hip-hop music, fan. Let's see where you go with that. Alright, connected. This shows how the forces that chase would-be revolutionaries from the cities set them up for success in the long term. Because they are driven into the countryside. Indeed. And the countryside is where it all begins. There, among the destitute of the back country, the uneducated people whom the party ignores, the spark will actually light. What do you mean by this? Colonial life takes place mainly in the coastal cities. The inner country is ignored, left to local warlords and shamans. With little profit to be found there, neither the colonial forces nor the unions of the colonized pay these starving souls notice. This breeds extensive distrust between those in the city and those in the country. Ignorance allows hate to fester. So, while would-be revolutionaries failed in the city, their grievances are perfectly primed to ignite that hate into action. Back it up. There are countless examples in history of the country exploding into violence. The Mau Mau uprising in Kenya comes to mind. The neglected in the country are susceptible to any story of horror from the city. They have few references to distinguish fact from fiction. True stories of abuse get spun into even greater tales. The settlers bathe in native blood, grind our bones to make their bread. Finally, something snaps. Country folk descend on colonial institutions, indiscriminately attacking police and doctors alike. Driven by hate and spontaneous rage, they go further than the revolutionary exiles ever would have. Though these exiles hardly respect the ignorant in the country, they will happily take advantage of the chaos. Connected. This establishes why, even with the factors we discussed, the uprising is inevitable. After all, only those touched by colonial life can be bound by it. Hey, the Black Rose. Congratulations on the 7th stream streak. Happy New Year to you as well. Yes. Looked at the clock and I was like, what day is it? We're in the new year. What day is it? Oh, man. It's going to be one of those years. Only then can revolution spread to the cities and to all people as the safety net crumbles. Clarify. The unrest is invited into the city by those struggling to survive, those unable to maintain the security of a job and home. And once fighting reaches the city, the colonial world is revealed as no true safe haven for the working native. With no reason to abstain from the fight, those once paralyzed by security will finally take up arms. Back it up. Oh, how can you be so sure fighting will spread to the city? Country folk view cities as the root of corruption. Inevitably, their rage turns to them. Colonial military will follow, and once safe streets are thrown into chaos. Against this backdrop of revolutionary leaders return, their calls to resist now amplified by the reality of conflict. But people didn't want revolution before, why would they now? Most feared the pain of change, but with fighting all around, the pain is already there, or here. There is little left to lose and much more to gain. Connect. How's this connected? This shows how once the struggle begins, its embers spread to the whole of the people. Even wet kindling will ignite under the right circumstances. Facing multiple conflicts on multiple fronts, the colonial power will be forced to yield to the revolutionary leaders. Clarifying? No colonial force can sustain itself indefinitely when besieged from all sides. Efforts to do so only become more expensive with time. Back it up. When the revolution has spread this widely, everyone fights as if their individual conflict represents the whole of the nation. If the colonists manage to suppress the embers at one location, the fires will only burn more brightly elsewhere. As a result, trying to maintain control stops being an appealing prospect for the colonizing country. As I mentioned in the previous argument, attempts to do so amount to economic self-harm. Connect. Through all the previous steps, leverage has finally been created to change the national situation. And with fighting at an end, the nation will finally be freed from all the conflicts of the past. Clarify. As the colonists retreat from city and country, the revolutionary leaders will be ready to fill the void. Independence is finally achieved. Back it up. This appears pretty self-evident, does it not? If the colonists withdraw, the future is in the hands of the native once more. What's to stop them from charting a better course forward? And connect. This is the conclusion, both of my argument and the chain of events. Colonists have retreated, the natives are finally free to build their own nation however they wish. Alright, we'll consult with this one too. Okay, wow. And it has mapped out quite the domino chain here. So many different social forces involved. There are a point where these forces don't line up as neatly as he thinks. He also keeps taking notes at me. He keeps taking notes and I don't like it. Discomfort with psychological profiling reflects deep-set insecurities. Okay. So... he's saying that the revolution starts outside the city and becomes big enough that the people inside the city fight back with the revolution. Definitely think uniting struggle is probably the way to go. No, it's not self-evident. That's why I'm asking. Therapists, am I right? They start like therapying you and you just don't know what to do. And you just start talking all the time. As long as the revolutionary struggle continues, conflicts between different groups of natives will be set aside. I think this is the point that I would challenge. Or If I were to challenge the thought that the revolution of the people in the country can... If I were to challenge that, I don't think uniting struggle would work there. Uniting struggle is more of a... I don't get the impression that the context there can be reversed. And so if I feel like I want to reverse that. But if I wanted to reverse that, then this is where I would do it. I think alienation can work here. Let's try alienation here. Okay, Fannin, I think I found a problem with your argument. Oh, lay it out for me. Well, you see... Yes? Never mind, it doesn't quite work. Let's forget I said anything. Fortunately, the human mind doesn't work like that. Okay. Mapped out quite the domino chain here. So many different social forces involved. Is there a point where these forces don't line up as neatly as he thinks? I'm not actually sure on this one. Could go with colonized intellectual here. I feel like I'm going to die on this one. Let me save. I feel like there's angles I want to go. I just can't figure out how I can convert them. try colonize intellectual here.
Nonsense!
But the natives who want to continue colonial society still exist. You've described a lot of different steps in the revolution, but how will this lead to them joining the struggle? Colonized intellectual wants to continue the system because the system provides them stability. When conflict has already reached the streets of the city, that stability no longer exists. Thus, as long as conflict rages, they will be forced to confront the way colonial life has affected everyone else. Now, that may not sway all of them, but it'll sway enough to make a significant difference. And it really believes the revolution will bring everyone together while it lasts. That's exactly the point that I want to make, but I don't see how I can make that point with the options that I have. Well, okay. I could go opposite mode with Uniting Struggle here. I don't have confidence in it, but we'll see what happens.
Nonsense!
This chain of cause and effect you've mapped out is incredibly intricate. You've tracked many different social factors and divides between groups to plot a path to successful decolonization. Holds up pretty well right up until the end. The biggest force keeping the people united, the revolutionary struggle itself. See, I wanted to make this point, this was the first point that I wanted to make, and I talked myself out of it because I interpreted it as a way of I want to tell him that uniting is the way to go, not that the process of the the process of uniting will then fade and things will start to crumble from there. Life is hard. The biggest force keeping the people united, the revolutionary struggle itself. So tell me, Fannin, what happens when that struggle comes to an end? Oh, excellent catch, Ariadne. Can't believe I missed that. Seems to me there are two toxic hierarchies in your worldview. First is the relationship between the colonizer and the colonized. The second is the relationship between city and country. Either relationship is healthy, and the colonial system definitely plays a part in making each worse. But the tension between city and country won't just disappear when the colonial power retreats. And when the common enemy is removed, all that distrust and suspicion will be front and center. But there is a good deal of nuance there. I appreciate your commitment to not generalizing, Fannin, honestly. But the fact we can say not all revolutionaries doesn't change the fact that, by your own analysis, the divide here is enormous. And there's no doubt those in the city emerge from the struggle in a far better position than the country folk. What's to stop the revolutionaries in the city from focusing on themselves? Or even worse, reestablishing an exploitive relationship with the country? To leave this problem unsolved feels like a job half done. The points you've raised are once again astute. In the aftermath of revolution, we frequently see revolutionaries act just as you say. They focus on enriching themselves while the country drifts back into ill-informed poverty, no better off than during the colonial regime. These heads of government sell their country to the most terrifying of all enemies, ignorance. Of course, the old colonial power takes no small joy in this. Look how things have gone since we left. We were right about those savages all along. How depressing. Even after all that bloodshed, nothing really changes. Oh, I strongly disagree. This half-done job is still better than one unstarted. Did you all believe dismantling colonialism would be clean and easy? No, of course not. But having no guarantee that life will actually improve for those who fought, progress or not. That's really, really rough.
Nonsense.
Guess we'll just have to... A moment, please. Our appointment is not yet over. This is not the first time I've reviewed this problem. A significant part of my work was dedicated to it. There is a way to build a better end state for all involved. Is it more violence? No, not if done correctly. Though if not, who knows? Alrighty. In the aftermath of revolution, the middle class and revolutionary party can easily slip into the oppressive void left by the colonists. They will rely on nationalism and prejudice to prop themselves up, instead of doing the hard work of supporting the people. To prevent the new government from betraying the people, we must reject centralized notions of leadership in favor of education. Thus, the development of government is bound with the development of the people as a whole. But you see, the Revolutionary Party must focus on raising up the people around them. We must rid ourselves of the contemptuous assumption that the masses are incapable of governing themselves. We ought to uplift the people, develop their brains, fill them with ideas. Only then can we rebuild in a way that actually benefits all, overcoming our last great obstacle and preventing the need for a second revolution down the line. Yes, everything can be explained to the people on the single condition that you really want them to understand. This is surprisingly a lot like the dream of Capra, finding ways to bring philosophical education to all, give everyone opportunities they didn't have before. I've never doubted many of our ideals are aligned, Senator, but I'm deeply skeptical your government will ever have the will to realize such a selfless aim. Look, I've got problems with Mom's plans too, mainly the part where they trapped her in a philosophical afterlife, but let's lay off her a bit. Very well, we'll return to my own theses. Ask your questions, Ariadne Jones.
Awesome.
What am I eating today? Alrighty. In the aftermath of the revolution, the middle class and revolutionary party can easily slip into the oppressive void left by the colonists. Clarifier. You noted the revolutionaries are well positioned to take over the colonial system. Left unchecked, they can pocket an enormous portion of the nation's wealth and never return it to the people as a whole. Back it up. Colonial power leaves behind an enormous amount of infrastructure and technology ripe for the taking. But seizing this wealth is not so much leaping ahead as it is beginning at the end. The nation reaches the late stage of economic development without knowing the determination and innovation of youth. Leaders imitate the most indulgent aspects of the colonial elite, building elaborate mansions and monuments and gating themselves from the people. Tourism becomes the industry of choice, an easy, lazy way to extract money from European powers. Come to beautiful colony land, no longer technically a colony, but give us money and we'll pretend. Connect. Having a more complete picture of the problem helps us determine what we wish to avoid. Okay. They will rely on nationalism and prejudice to prop themselves up, instead of doing the hard work of supporting the people. Clarify. The nationalist rulers of underdeveloped countries will not do any real work on behalf of the people. Instead, such leaders attempt to keep the people complacent, fanning the flames of suspicion against a series of scapegoats. It does not stop with those who were once settlers. Different tribes, different ideologies. Now, here we go. All will be targeted. As time passes, the boogeymen change. But there's always someone to hate, and the government will use that hate to keep control. Oof. Oof, indeed. Back it up. Power and prejudice are a dangerous combination. In colonial times, prejudice existed on both sides, but power was entirely in the hands of the settlers. Post-independence, however, the formula is different. The hate of the native is given preference. Citizens will demand foreigners be purged from public life, and since doing so doubles as consolidating power for the government, it will oblige. Connected. This shows the harmful methods an underdeveloped government will use to maintain power. It's connected because we must understand this misbehavior if we are to adequately prevent it. To prevent the new government from betraying the people, we must reject centralized notions of leadership in favor of education. How decentralized are we talking, and how does that mesh with education? Are we going full anarchy, Fannin's cool no-rules school? Not at all. The free-form nature of anarchism would struggle to elevate and inform the uneducated as needed. This does mean, however, we must avoid having all the power concentrated in one place. Leadership, education, defense, all should be brought to the people nationwide, not hoarded by bureaucrats in cities. Still, I'd like to hear more about how, if we can. Fair enough. I will expand on these ideas. So, revolutionary figureheads should be viewed with the greatest skepticism. Talk of unity, so key during the struggle, becomes a tool of subjugation. Clarify. Keep a careful eye on those who led the people in the past. Where once their powers of persuasion were used for good, now they are likely to be used for ill. Back it. The desire for a hero is always questionable. It encourages people to look to the top instead of to their fellows to improve their situation. During the revolution, such figureheads had a use, awakening the people and setting them on a forward march, heroic and unmitigated. But after the revolution, a leader's talk of unity is no longer a call to action, it is a call to complacency. They put the people to sleep, and 3 or 4 times a year ask them to remember the colonial period and bask in how far they've come. Once you were stepped on by foreign colonists, now you are stepped on by people who look like you. Yes, we must prevent the party from ever becoming a willing tool in the hands of a leader. I don't know if anybody has seen the show The 100 on the CW network or whatever, but I'm the more Fannin talks, the more I start thinking about that show, and there might be some parallels here. Disregarding the fact that 100 teenagers are thrown down to Earth and forced to survive, But it's very interesting. Connect. This point illustrates that the most central point of decentralized government is also the center of potential corruption. Makes sense. It's clearly an essential observation. Get it? Like essential, but you said central a lot, so your compulsive punning almost qualifies as a disorder. Remember that show? One of the better Channel 11 shows? It was surprisingly better than I thought it was. It did devolve into madness. At least multiple times, but there was a lot of quality in that show, for sure. I didn't finish it, so I only got up to a certain point in the madness before I was like, okay, maybe I don't want to partake in this anymore. Leadership must instead be spread among the country, educating and elevating the people of the region in which they are embedded. Clarify. Leading members of the party ought to avoid the capital as if it had the plague. By locating themselves among the country instead, they will have to serve the needs of each region, and primary among those needs is education. Back it up. When you live in a place for long enough, you become connected to it, so the leaders will become connected to the people of regions otherwise ignored. They will see what is lacking, or it is lacking for them too, and leverage the national apparatus to fix the issues. Sometimes foreign technology and assistance may be required, but in the process, the native should always be educated on these tools. Thus, the people learn to build their own bridges and man their own machines. Soon, they are innovating beyond the template of before. And connect. This is the core of the solution to everything we've discussed. The only way to fix the divide between the party in the city and the people of the country is to eliminate the divide. In place of a standing army, citizens should be armed. Any conflicts that must be fought should be handled by this militia. Clarify. We should have no permanent soldiers, and the number of permanent officers should be kept to a minimum. Instead, the people should be prepared as a militia, ready to fight if the need arises, but dedicated to other tasks. Back it up. If the army becomes a self-sustaining body, sooner or later it will find itself without any definite mission. Idle generals will draw up their own manifestos and come to threaten the government. The only way to avoid this is to refocus these individuals on other tasks. An engineer is 1,000 times more indispensable to his country than an officer. After all, unless an external power attempts to assert control, what threat would demand a standing army? Oh, man. You know I'm gonna do it. But what if tomatoes start coming alive and killing people? Adney, why? Ultimately, as ridiculous as that example is, such a threat would illustrate the effectiveness of the militia I mentioned earlier. The people may disagree on many things, but they would be united by the desire not to be murdered by tomatoes. Brought up killer tomatoes again, because why not? Heck yeah! Gotta get that achievement. Gotta get the dialogue, even though my voice is totally gone. Connected. This is another example of how centralized government can hurt the newly independent nation. Okay, thus the development of government is bound with the development of the people as a whole. Clarify. The government is not for the people, it is of the people. The growth of government must grow the people as well. We must try relentlessly and passionately to teach the masses that everything depends on them. If we stagnate, it is their responsibility. Probably supposed to be a comma there. And if we go forward, it is due to them too. Back it. As long as the people remain uneducated, there is no hope for the nation to elevate itself. Everything we've discussed illustrates this. But with the whole of the nation or national apparatus focused on education, we can build a successful nation. Connect is my conclusion. I believe it's sufficiently conclusive. Alrighty, so we got tribalism. Loyalties can turn towards ethnic and cultural subgroups if tensions are not actively countered. I think tribalism can go right here. Let's see what the consult says. know Fannin is talking about newly liberated countries, but some of this stuff sounds familiar. What do you mean? I mean, like the government focusing on enriching themselves, using prejudice and group resentment to keep people complacent. Doesn't that all ring a little true for you? Too real? Okay, let's get back to theoretical ex-colonized countryland. I think if you just used tomato, it probably would have. What? Is it a quote or is it a clip? Let's see what tribalism does here. I feel like it fits.
Nonsense!
Okay, first things first. If mistrust between city and country is the last great obstacle for nation building, you have a nice plan to tackle that mistrust. Focusing the entire national apparatus on empowering the neglected. That'll do a lot of good. Oh, how interesting. Is this it then? Has Fannin found the ideal approach to government? Well, he's tackled what was presented as the last great obstacle. But beyond that obstacle lurks several hundred more. Oh no, what's he writing now? Bombastic exclamations are endearing, but often thinly justified. Better get to the point, Ariadne. As Fannin laid out the problems with post-colonial governments, one thing became clear. City and country is not, in fact, the only toxic dynamic that remains. Society contains countless ethnic, political, and religious divisions, each bound with their own explosive packages of resentment. So we have more steps to take. I'm aware of this. I highlighted these problems myself. As we raise the people up, we'll find ways to address them. Ah, well, there's the rub. The methods you propose to raise people up, to avoid clashes between city and country. They make countering other conflicts far more difficult. Having remote pockets of government focus on local issues is wonderful for activism. And a militia instead of an army definitely puts power in the hands of citizens. But things get more complicated when local population A hates local population B. If you train them all to fight and remove all countermeasures, what do you do if they turn on each other? If we raise them up, teach them all to be better, well, you said yourself, no cause gets 100% support. Some will inevitably act on old hatred. You also stated that when fighting breaks out, the safety net collapses. Reasons for restraint disappear. You'll wind up with a free-for-all with no one capable of reining it in. Fannin, you're covering the floor with gasoline and hoping no one lights a match. Why was there a colon? Remarkable fortitude under duress. For someone of her background, Ariadne Jones is capable. Sometimes, when I'm feeling truly self-destructive, I review the more recent history of Algeria, the country I fought so hard to liberate. I wasn't alive when independence was achieved. If I had been, maybe I could have made a difference. But the country's history is dominated by coups and civil wars, everything I hope to avoid, all rooted in the fundamental failure of the government to unite its people. Factionalism may have fruited under colonialism, but it is also a sociological fact that no theory of unity can abolish. And yet, I still believe somewhere out there a bright new future none of us have imagined awaits. Something different from the European models of the past, paying regard to the prodigious theses she has put forward, but also aware of her crimes. We can turn over a new leaf. We can work out new concepts and set forth a new man. Yes, I still believe, despite all evidence. Forgive me my small cognitive dissonance. Of course, Fannin. Pythia Smith, I have one last thought for you as well. I can on some level appreciate your belief in the system. Surely democracy should be able to empower the people and change what needs to be changed. But whatever the merits of their ideas, the actions of European men have failed to bring the problem of mankind to an infinitely higher plane. Do not be another who falls short. Fight past all the barriers, whatever it takes. Perhaps you just can. Thank you, Fannin. That's 5th chapter done. That was... Hey, at least you kinda got his endorsement at the end there, right? As much as he'd ever endorse someone so embedded in the colonial system. That's what you wanted. You have to feel good about that, huh? I don't know anymore. What? Adney. Look, I'm tired. Tired of disappointing you. Time for me to admit what's been obvious from the start. Our system isn't perfect. I guess I'm walking evidence of that, huh? My position, constantly vying for supporters, any way you can, admitting you've changed your mind can be a death sentence. People who agreed with you before feel betrayed. People who agree with you now mock you for being slow or doubt your sincerity. So the longer I participate, the more I dig in. I stop learning and just fight. I fought Confucius. I fought you. I fought everyone we've encountered. You didn't fight nobody in this place. I didn't even question what I believed deep down. It was just what I had to do. No perfect system would encourage such a toxic cycle. Mom, I don't believe it. Why now? I tried to tell you this. Dad tried to tell you this. We all tried to tell you this. I don't know. I was so focused on the good I thought I could do. I guess I didn't care. But I'm going. I'm going to lose my election, Adney. I'm going to lose. So what does it matter? Well, I don't know if that's true or not. Not really. But no matter what, at least we can get you out of here now, right? That's the most important thing to me. It's true, Pythia Smith's viewpoint has fundamentally shifted, it seems. Tell the gate what you've learned. Let the way home open. Very well. Gate, here is the answer. The one I should have given long ago. People have views that don't make sense, that are often driven by spite. They'd rather vote for someone who gives them easy answers, someone like Tucker, than pursue hard truths. Knowing we're all so lost, how can anyone ever hope to govern well? In the end, my daughter was right. There's no societal structure that won't have fatal issues. Nothing happened. Maybe it didn't hear you. No, it hurt her. Then I don't understand. That felt right, Adney. It felt honest, more honest than I've been in years. And isn't that all it was supposed to take, Arbiter? An answer that was true. Proof I can grow. Well, what's more true than humanity's ability to utterly screw itself? I'm afraid the way remains closed to you. Well, that's it, then. Mom. I'm sorry, Adney. I don't think there is anything more I can do. That gate is never going to open. I'm stuck here.